Welcome to the Lancaster Patriot Podcast. My name is Chris Hume. I'm the managing editor of the Lancaster Patriot, a newspaper and media company serving Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and beyond. Today's episode is brought to you by Heritage Floors. Heritage Floors can help you create the home of your dreams with shades, carpets, area rugs, specialty flooring, and much more. As they say, there's no place like home, and no matter what you're looking to do with your flooring, the folks at Heritage Floors are there to listen and help you with that project. Now, if you're a do-it-yourselfer, they have all the products you need at amazing prices, and if you'd rather have someone else install your flooring, they can help with the installation as well. They offer the quality that your home needs as a small-town shop who can compete with big brand prices. Visit their showroom at 60 North Ronks Road in Ronks to learn more. Go to heritagefloorspa.com. Your perfect home starts at Heritage Floors. Well, in today's episode, I want to talk to you about the Lancaster County Commissioners meeting that occurred on Wednesday, August 31st. Now, at this meeting, a local pastor spoke up and addressed the commissioners and those in attendance about the topic of socialism. Now, the pastor was Joel Saint, who has been on this podcast before, and Lord willing will be on again. And in fact, the topic of socialism is one that is very important to consider. And our next episode will deal with the idea of government education being the most socialistic institution, the most socialistic practice that is occurring in our county, in our state, and in our nation. But at this commissioners meeting, Pastor Saint brought up this subject of socialism, and it was very interesting because after he brought up this subject and addressed it from a biblical perspective, all three county commissioners responded, and the two Republican commissioners responded in defense of what Pastor Saint was saying, and the Democrat commissioner, Mr. John Trescott, responded in opposition to what he was saying. It was very interesting to what they said in response to Pastor Saint. So I want to actually play this clip of this county commissioners meeting and then make some comments on it. So let's start with this clip, and this is going to be Pastor Joel Saint speaking at the Lancaster County Commissioners meeting on August 31st.
My name is Joel Saint. I'm Denver, Pennsylvania. I'm a pastor in Lancaster County. I'd like to briefly quote this morning from that best-selling book. By the way, good morning, commissioners and attendees. I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak before you folks this morning. I'd like to briefly address three passages from the best-selling book of all time. That, of course, would be the Bible. From 1 Kings 4:25, and Judah and Israel dwelt safely, every man under his vine and under his fig tree from Dan to Beersheba, all the days of Solomon. Also from Micah 4:4, but they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. And then the 10th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. I am sharing these passages today because we have a description of both production and safety. Notice that they are here conjoined. Production and safety. Dwelt safely under his vine, under his fig tree, which is a euphemism, I'm sure, although it includes that. At some point, we must ask, how is production achieved? How is safety realized? A man I know from India, his name was Vishal Mangalwadi, wrote a book called The Book That Changed Your World, and as a young man, he asked himself the question, why is it in the West, everybody has a car, there's air conditioning, there's comfort, while we here in India are struggling with none of that for thousands of years? I began to read the Bible and began to understand some things, that there is such a thing as private property, owned by individuals and owned by families. I'm here this morning to briefly address and this is beyond the county, this onslaught of the idea that I can pinch my neighbor's goods because I want to. Because my neighbor has goods, I somehow deserve my neighbor's goods. It's called socialism. There's three ways to gain wealth, only three that I know of. One is through creation. I make something out of raw material. The other is through trading. I trade something of value to someone else. And the other way is through force. We call that robbery. If there was no such thing as coveting my neighbor's goods, there would be no such thing as socialism. Socialism I see growing throughout our nation and even in our county. And it's pernicious and it's wicked. Are we still allowed to use that term in the United States of America? Socialism is institutionalized covetousness. It's the idea that somehow my neighbor's goods, somehow, through some moral imperative, belong to me. As a pastor in Lancaster County, I want to register my opposition and my challenge to it, to any forms of socialism that make their pernicious ways into our state and into our county. Thank you for these moments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. Appreciate you coming in and saying that, and agreed.
Let's stop there for a moment. So that was Pastor Joel Saint at the Lancaster County Commissioners meeting, and I'm going to play these responses from Commissioner Parsons, Commissioner DiAugustino, and Commissioner Trescott in just a moment here. But of course, it's interesting to, number one, point out that what Pastor Saint is doing is something that all godly pastors should do in some form or fashion, and that is to speak up before the civil magistrates and declare the law word of God. We've gotten away from that in our nation. Pastors now take the Bible and they relegate it to an only spiritual realm, if you will, or within the four walls of the church, and they never take the word of God out into society and speak before the civil magistrates, thus saith the Lord. But that is what Pastor Saint is doing, and we need more pastors to do that. Now, socialism, and Pastor Saint didn't get into it there, but we will in tomorrow's podcast. The idea of socialism is demonstrated very clearly in the institution of government education, where the government says you don't own your property. We are going to forcefully tax your property, even though you don't want to pay for an ungodly education for someone else's kids, and we're going to do this in the name of the interests of the state. So all the comments that will follow from the Republican commissioners, their conservative talking points notwithstanding, one wonders if they will really, truly stand against socialism in our county and in our state by seeking to end the socialistic system of government-funded education, which of course is taxpayer-funded, which of course is monies that are taken from the people against their will. There's a place for taxation for a government that is doing its role, which is to punish evildoers, but that taxation should not be forced, and if you don't pay your taxes, you should not be thrown in prison. There's taxation in the Bible, but as Pastor Saint has pointed out before, you don't see punishments by the state authorized by God to those who don't pay their taxes. Of course, if you had a biblical government, their role would be very, very limited. It would be limited to punishing evildoers, punishing those who have broken those laws of God that are civil offenses. And the idea of education, the idea of social welfare, the idea of healthcare, none of those things fall under the purview of civil government from a biblical worldview. And so, of course, when Pastor Saint here speaks about socialism, he is speaking of anything that the government does in taking money, taking property, taking the capital of citizens and using it to provide a service. That is not what the government is supposed to do. Now, Commissioner Trescott here, and I'll play these clips, is going to say, well, no, this is not socialism. We don't see the transfer of wealth and property and the means, controlling the means of production, I think is how he puts it. But what we see is the government, it's socialism because the government's coming in and saying, you don't own the land, and when it comes to government education, you don't own the children either. The parents don't own the children. The state does. The children don't belong to the parents. They belong to the state, and so the state now will take control. So I want to play these clips here now. Commissioner Parsons is going to speak first, and he's going to agree with the overall premise of what Pastor Saint is saying. Now, my challenge to Commissioner Parsons and Commissioner DiAugustino is to be consistent in their approval of Joel Saint's comments here and actually go all the way and say, yes, if socialism is evil, then what is the alternative? We want a free society where the government does not forcibly tax you and your property in order to provide social welfare, which, of course, is alive and well in the county as well as throughout the state. So let's continue here and listen to Commissioner Parsons. And it's interesting because Joel Saint's comments here kind of get these three commissioners into a bit of an argument, if you want to call that, more of an opportunity for each of them to express their disagreement, I guess at least the two Republicans against the one Democrat here. And it's done in a very peaceable and mild way, but it is somewhat comical to hear them go back and forth here because one, Commissioner Trescott, clearly believes that the state should forcibly tax you and do so at increasing rates and then distribute that wealth to those in society who are less fortunate. Now, Commissioner Parsons and DiAugustino are opposed to that idea. I would just challenge them to be consistent in that and stand up in opposition against government school, which is the most socialistic example that we could find anywhere. So let's continue with these comments. These are all in response now to what Pastor Saint said. He won't speak again during the official meeting here, but all three commissioners will. So here we go.
It's very disturbing to see both socialism and even communism, which we know socialism leads to.
Again, this is Commissioner Parsons responding now.
The growth of that all over the country. And the latest example being Joe Biden quote, canceling student debt, which he can't do constitutionally. It's clearly illegal. But really, that's theft from people who paid back their college loans or who never went to college, and giving that to people who signed an agreement to pay it back. And it's deeply concerning. And even a few years ago, you wouldn't have seen that type of attempt. And so appreciate you speaking on that this morning.
So that was Commissioner Parsons. And again, I wholeheartedly agree that what President Biden is doing or attempting to do is immoral and wrong. But again, I would point out that the Republican-endorsed government education system is even more of an offense than President Biden's college quote-unquote forgiveness scheme or Bernie Sanders' plan to provide tuition-free education. Providing a quote-unquote free education for children pre-K through 12 is way more socialistic, at least a greater degree, and much more resources and much more confiscation of wealth from the citizens than what President Biden is doing or what Bernie Sanders proposes. So again, consistency is needed here. If Commissioner Parsons and Commissioner DiAugustino are going to remonstrate against President Biden's really socialistic idea, well, the government will just pay for this stuff by taxation, really, and debasing the currency. If they're going to oppose that, why do they not oppose government socialistic education at the county and the state level? They're not being consistent. Let's continue here now. Commissioner Trescott is going to respond to what Pastor Saint said and what Commissioner Parsons said here. So now this is Commissioner John Trescott, who is the lone Democrat on the three-man commission board here.
Well, since socialism is the state owning the means of production, services, and distribution, and I don't see any government taking over the means of distribution or production or transportation or services, I believe the pastor is mistaken on what actually socialism is. To say that there are different people who want a different distribution of taxes, that people feel that there are inequities in how the tax code is written.
We got to pause it there for a second. So Commissioner Trescott is saying, well, no, I don't see any redistribution of these wealth or transportation services. And yet in almost the same breath, he says, well, people may disagree about the redistribution of taxes. Well, taxation is an attack on the private property of the citizens. And forced taxation is an unbiblical concept. So the very idea that the state would force you to pay them money and then use your wealth to provide services, that is a form of socialism. It's the state saying, we are going to take control of your property, at least to a degree here, and we are going to then use your money to provide services. And there's certainly many different ways that happens and many different forms that it takes. But when the government comes in and does something it's not supposed to do and then takes your money to do it, and then uses your money for the good of the society, quote unquote, this is a form of socialism. They are in effect controlling your wealth. And when it comes to government education specifically, they're taking over that industry and saying the government's going to run this with your money. Let's continue on here.
Written on how different things like, I don't know, not-for-profits or other things that get tax benefits that take my tax dollars, and then become political. I find that somewhat offensive, that there is a government policy that President Biden has put forward that will be judged, whether it's legal or not, is again a distribution of taxes and changes in tax policy, just like there is a change in tax policy when it comes to how fast you can deplete your reserves for when you have an oil or gas well. That's a decision that was made at times to set how those taxes would be done and whether those reserves that are really for everybody because they're under the land of the United States are therefore taxed or given tax credits. So I think there's perfectly good discussion about tax policy, but to use the fear mongering of socialism, communism, which aren't happening and aren't happening anywhere in the United States, but to use that and to use those words, that's just tough to listen to. But thank you for coming today and expressing your opinion, sir.
Well, it's also tough to listen to Commissioner Trescott there use sleight of hand to say, well, no, there's no control or redistribution of anything. It's all just taxation. Well, just calling it taxation doesn't eliminate the fact that what is happening is the government is forcibly taking your property, making you pay for it. I mean, if we say, well, oh, no, they're not taking it. No, you just have to pay us for it. And if you don't pay us for your property, then we're going to come and confiscate your property. So the government says, okay, we actually own the land. You may be a homeowner, but you actually have to pay us rent in order to keep owning your land. And then we're going to use your money to provide all these social services. And Commissioner Trescott can just say, well, that's not socialism. That's just taxation. Well, that's the point. What is happening here with this tax system is socialistic. And Commissioner Trescott can deny that and then say, well, this is not happening anywhere in the nation. It's just amazing. Now, Commissioner DiAgostino now is going to get involved in this and respond to what Commissioner Trescott has said.
Well, I totally disagree with that. As a student of history, I can say that, socialism is different stripes, different incarnations, different degrees, but I'm not sure who said this or where it can be found, but if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's a duck. And what we have right now is obviously heading toward more and more of a socialistic values. It's unfortunate. I remember pre-2019 or 2020, pre-pandemic, the economy was humming. We didn't have the kind of things we're seeing now. We can go through a litany of things that were going well for the United States. And think what you may of what happened during the pandemic. It's largely what government did to actually inflict the pain that we're seeing now on people. And then the continued pain being inflicted upon the government as it tries to wrestle with the very things that it did in the first place. That's unfortunate. So I'm disturbed as well. And I appreciate you coming in and raising that concern, because we do need to be careful. We are heading into an area, quite frankly, I don't think any of us have seen, both from the respect of the government's actions in terms of policies and also dictates. It's a concern, and we do need to make sure that we are on our guard and continuing to speak out about it. And of course, as it was mentioned by someone here, there's the ballot box, and if people are concerned, they will register that concern at the ballot box. But thank you for coming in.
So that was Commissioner DiAgostino responding. And of course, he is exactly right as far as COVID-19 and what the government did. Again, the government came in and said, we actually control the economy. We actually own it all. And so we are the ones that can say whether or not businesses should stay open or closed. And again, Commissioner Trescott can try to use different words to call it something different. But when the government controls the market, when the government controls education, when the government actually owns your property and you pay a rent to them, that is socialism. It is a form of it, it is an application of it, and it is unbiblical. So Commissioner DiAgostino is absolutely right there. Again, I would just challenge him to consistency. The most socialistic thing that we could imagine is the government school system, and I've yet to hear Commissioner DiAgostino or Commissioner Parsons speak out against that in all their remonstrations against socialism. So I challenge them to be consistent. But the conversation is not done yet. There's some more comments here. Again, Pastor Saints bringing up the topic of socialism kind of opened a door for the three gentlemen here to discuss it and disagree with one another.
Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of England.
Now this is Commissioner Parsons quoting Margaret Thatcher here.
They've got the usual socialist disease. They've run out of other people's money, which is happening here in the United States. There's no question we're going to run out of other people's money. That's happening right here in Lancaster County. We had people come in and present a written document to us with the hammer and sickle of the Socialist Soviet Union and warn us that we need to watch our backs. And so we have it right here in Lancaster County as well.
Yes, indeed. We do have it right here in Lancaster County. We do have socialism in full force, and I don't know if I've said it once. I've said it a billion times, but Commissioner Parsons and the forced taxation of people in this county to pay for, one, government education, and two, any sort of social welfare program that the county is running under your watch is also just as evil and wicked as any other form of socialism. So please be consistent in your denunciation of socialism. Get rid of all these forms of socialism so we can actually have a free county. I think Commissioner Trescott may have one more comment here, so let's continue on with this.
I'm watching 360. I'll tell you that much.
That was DiAgostino.
All I can say is let's keep
Now we got Commissioner Trescott here, I believe, with the final word.
shooting up that fear. Fear sells. So keep going at it.
Well, you could call it fear. You could call it speaking the truth. When someone comes in and presents a written threat to you, I think it's appropriate to talk about that.
I wonder what other people in other countries thought when they were talking about this before it happened. So, all right, anything else in the public? Not, then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
All right, so that is the end of the County Commissioners meeting, and it was certainly interesting there at the end. You have Commissioner Trescott saying, well, there's no socialism happening. You have Commissioner DiAugustino and Commissioner Parsons saying, well, yeah, in fact, there is. And you have Commissioner Parsons, of course, bringing up the comment or the note on a banner that I believe Lancaster Stands Up presented, and Commissioner Trescott saying, well, you guys are just fear-mongering. This pastor coming in and warning about socialism is just fear-mongering, and we don't need to worry about that. There's no socialism happening here. And, of course, all three county commissioners are complicit in some degree or another, at least in the fact that they are not speaking up against the socialistic practices in our own county, government education, government welfare programs. And as Pastor Saint would say later, not at the meeting, but I believe he spoke with someone there, and he believes in welfare programs, and I do too. We believe in social welfare programs. We don't believe in government-run welfare programs. Number one, because God has not authorized the government to do that in Scripture. That's first and foremost. And number two, because whenever the government gets involved in something like that, it's disastrous and inefficient, wasteful, and useless. So we believe in welfare programs not run by the government. We believe in education, but not run by the government. So I encourage anyone who's listening who has concerns about the continued direction our county is going, I encourage you to go out to these meetings, speak up. And if there are any pastors that are listening, follow the example of the prophets who took the word of God, applied it to their day, and called on the civil magistrates to govern according to God's law word. So again, that was the county commissioner meeting from August 31st. That was Joel Saint initially who made these comments about socialism and then sort of kickstarted a conversation among all three commissioners on socialism. So until next time, my name is Chris. This is the Lancaster Patriot Podcast. If you are not a subscriber to our newspaper, visit thelancasterpatriot.com. Subscribe today. We are covering the stories that matter here in Lancaster County. We deliver right to your door once a week, 52 times a year. Go to our website, thelancasterpatriot.com, to learn more information. Subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, God bless and Godspeed.